Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Productivity Voice. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith.
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
And we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. I think it is episode 46, What Dr. Seuss Can Teach You About Productivity, and we're recording this on March 1st, 2021. And as you can see, Augusto is currently in transit, so he may be just moving along there while we have our conversation. So I'm gonna be having him focus on the road as opposed to on us, but we're gonna make our way through the show, notwithstanding. So each week, we review and discuss the productivity and technology news headlines of the week. And this week, we have our theme, which is Dr. Seuss and productivity. And it turns out that Dr. Seuss was actually a really prolific person, just generally. And because it is going to be Dr. Seuss's birthday, I think tomorrow, I thought we would have a little conversation around Dr. Seuss and his work. And it's really quite interesting because Dr. Seuss himself was quite a bit of an activist. He had a lot of political thoughts, and he wanted to share those thoughts. And I just thought he's a very interesting character generally. Augusto, do you have any thoughts about Dr. Seuss that you wanted to share? And I'll let you figure out your audio situation, and I'll kind of start with my thoughts, which are that he just generally had all of these various thoughts about how he was going to produce content. And I thought it was really quite interesting the ways in which he espoused these thoughts. And so he actually worked through a wide variety of different types of I don't want to call them hacks, because there were these little tricks and techniques around things. But for me, the most important thing that he really espoused was this idea of working within restraint. And he liked to think about this from the perspective of how do you constrain your world. And so he basically said, let me take a certain set of words and let me do everything I need to do with those certain set of words. And that's really how Green Eggs and Ham was written. He constrained himself to, I think it was like 50 words or something like that, and worked through the writing of that entire piece by doing so. And I think this is one of those cases where, because he's working in three different modalities, right? It's writing, it's illustration, and it's kind of narrative, if you want to consider it that. But he's basically putting those three pieces, that story, putting together the various words in basically poetic phrases, and he is also illustrating all these pieces. He decided to constrain himself in one particular category in order to do that. And I think in our own productive world, we have to remember that when we are trying to get things done, we're always doing them inside of some kind of constraint, and we forget that constraint exists, and therefore we just think the sky's the limit. And this is Parkinson's law, right? So work will expand to the space and time you give it. So why not constrain things? And I actually take it a step further, which is that we can actually make this more, for lack of a better word, fun, by engaging in some time constraint that gives us the ability to go ahead and say, okay, this thing has to get done, and it may seem, say, mundane to do it. But if I give myself a shortened time frame, then I can actually increase the fun to do that thing by virtue of saying, I'm going to constrain myself to this. Now, Dr. Seuss, he gives it 50 words to create Green Eggs and Ham. I'm basically saying use time as that constraint to be able to increase your productivity. So if you say, okay, I need to make these 5 phone calls, and typically each of these phone calls takes me roughly 5 minutes a piece. 5 phone calls, 15 minutes, times 5 is 25 minutes. Well, could you do those calls in 20 minutes and shave off 5 minutes? That's a challenge. And we as humans are motivated by challenge. So we are engaged in the process of challenge. So could you do that in in those same 5 phone calls in 20 minutes. That's the kind of restraint that then gamifies the process and really increases your chances of greater success. What was otherwise mundane now is kind of a race against the clock, and that can be fun and interesting and allows you to be able to do that. Now, of course, you're always keeping in mind quality and keeping that quality control at kind of in its highest form and going from there. Augusto, what are your thoughts related to Dr. Seuss and productivity?
Dr. Seuss is an interesting character. I didn't discover Dr. Seuss as I was not raised in the state, and I really discovered Dr. Seuss with my kids when it was time for my kids to start reading books. That's when I started getting the books and I started learning about that you described about the constraints and the productivity. But that said, it was really interesting how he, in a certain way, gamified, that productivity aspect. When the editors told him, "Oh, that cannot be done." What do you mean that cannot be done? Let me show you how it's going to be done. Okay, even I'm willing to do it in less words in the next book, as he did with the books. But at the same time, he showed and proved that even with the limited resources, you can work and produce, work of art, and you can be more effective. So we tend to think of all the resources that we need instead of thinking, what can we do better with less resources, or with the resources that we have? And I think that's one of the biggest teachings of Dr. Seuss.
So James Clear actually wrote a very interesting article on this whole concept of restraint, the story behind it, and kind of the bet that was made between Dr. Seuss and his friend at Random House. And so I will put a link to that in the show notes. I just think it's a very interesting story that kind of solidifies what we were talking about. And in closing out this part of the conversation, I thought I would read just a couple of things from lifehack.org. There was an article called 11 Important Life Lessons from Dr. Seuss, and not all of them, but some of them are really unique and interesting. And one, of course, is on choosing your own life direction. And these are just some quotes from Dr. Seuss's work. And it says, "You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know, and you are the guy who decides where to go." And guy or gal or other, you decide where you go. And so that's just, like all of these various phrases and the ways in which he puts together his rhymes and everything else are just so interesting and unique, and he really has a way of saying the right thing in the right way to elicit a message. He also goes on to say, on reading and learning, the more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. And he has another one, which is, it's better to know how to learn than to know. And that is also so true, right? Learning is such a good one. He goes, everything stinks till it's finished. That's on procrastination, right? So, the idea of just getting over the most simple things. He has another one here. I've heard there are troubles of more than one kind. Some come from ahead and some come from behind. But I've brought a big bat and I'm all ready, you see. Now my troubles are going to have troubles with me. And so he just has this really great way of putting together all of these various phrases. And so I just love making my way through Dr. Seuss's work, and actually with my most recent niece, I had been reading some of those pieces to her, and it has been just a lot of fun to reenact some of the stories from my own childhood and sharing that with her. There was recently a new version. I guess a new book that was put out after his passing that was about the solar system, and I had actually recorded that for her to be able to listen to on her own, and so that was a lot of fun to do as well. So anyway, happy birthday to Dr. Seuss, and hopefully you can take some of his inspiration for your own productivity. And so with that takes us along to our stories of the week, and so let's get into our first part of our stories. First up is that Chrome is getting an upgrade to catch up with the MacBooks and the PCs, according to Tom's guide. And so, in essence, what's coming is screen recording on Chrome OS. So Chromebooks are going to be getting screen recording, and I think this is really great. I think this is one of those things where leveling up the capabilities of Chrome OS are going to be really important. And the second kind of update out of Android Police is that Chrome is also going to get the ability for you to access your emoji. Right now, in order to be able to type emoji, you have to either launch the on-screen keyboard and click the little smiley face emoji to be able to launch it. The other is that you have to right click inside of Chrome, not inside of anywhere else. You have to kind of right click inside of Chrome, and there's an emoji option, and you can then go ahead and insert an emoji. But otherwise, you really don't have a capability of launching emoji. And so Chrome OS will now soon have an emoji picker that will show up in line from the search box, so that you're able to go ahead and launch that. So I'm looking forward to seeing this. I think it's really important. I wish there was a keyboard shortcut. I really do. I wish there was a keyboard shortcut to be able to do that. Those of you who are on Windows, it is Windows and then the semicolon. So Windows semicolon will launch the emoji picker. And then if you were on the Mac, if I remember my keyboards correctly, it's Control Command Spacebar, I think. So, or you can check it out within the Apple system preferences, but I think it's Control Command Spacebar, and that will launch the emoji picker. So I'm hoping that Chrome goes ahead and gives us an option to be able to launch that via keyboard. Okay, next up we have Google Chat is potentially coming to the web with a new redesign. And so according to Chrome Unboxed, they're talking about Google Chat basically getting a redesign that will allow for just basically a better view for people to be able to interact with it in that sidebar with a little bit more Gmail style interaction. Now, I've already seen the Google Chat pop up in my own Gmail interface as its own chatbot, as its own little chat box, and so perhaps that's what I'm seeing, and I'm not sure if that's something that is just unique to me as they're testing. I'm one of those people who have seen the test or not, but I've already seen it as its own little chat box, so I'm not quite sure whether that's what they're talking about or something else. But I'm seeing more and more people coming onto Google Chat because of Google deprecating Hangouts, and so we'll see as more people come online to Google Chat whether or not Google decides to get more and more of the interface more friendly. I just don't think it's very consumer friendly, so it just needs more work in that category. All right, there is also an article here about how to get more space in your Google storage, and it's nothing earth-shaking, world-shaking in essence, but in essence, it's just giving some instructions on how to go through your Google account systematically, and just like in a structured approach to say these are the things that take up space inside of my Google account and therefore reduce the storage limits. So check out that Verge story. We'll put that link in the show notes for you so that you're capable of checking it out. A couple other Google items. Go ahead.
You go to the next one. I agree with you. It's nothing earth-shattering, but I notice a lot of people struggle with this, and that's the reason I like that article, because there is a lot of people who don't want necessarily to pay Google whatever is the annual fee or the monthly fee for having more storage, wants to understand where their storage is gone. And this article will show you a systematic way to understand what you are using of a storage and how can you plan better moving forward.
Yes, and so just a couple other Google stories. Google is now bringing Google Recorder as a web app soon, and supposedly that web app will bring Pixel users. So Google Recorder is, I think, still currently only available on Google Pixel phones. and the newest versions of those. And so Google Recorder is an audio recording app that also transcribes as you are speaking. So it's a real-time transcription service right there on the phone itself. So it's not going up to the cloud in order to do its work. And so if it's coming to a web app, that's even better. That's amazing. And the idea of audio backups is also great because all of that audio is being stored natively on the device, locally on the device. And so if we can get that to go up to the cloud in some way, shape, or form, I think that's going to be positive. Again, this always increases a security risk, but I think Google knows how to keep your data safe. So I'm pretty comfortable with them being able to back that up via that. And so since I'm on all Google Pixel devices, I like the idea of having the capability of audio transcribing, just as I'm talking things out or those kinds of things, just being able to capture my own thoughts in audio and seeing it also represented in text. And then last but not least, in the Google side of things, Google's adding a new badge for unread comments in Google Docs. So in essence, right now, when you are looking at your comments within a Google Docs, you're not really capable of knowing how many comments are in there. Now they're going to be adding a badge to be able to tell you how many are unread comments. So if you have a voluminous number of comments in a document, like I'm working on the draft of a book, and so there is a wide number of comments in the sidebar, and it's just nice to know how many are unread so I can go through those and figure them out and take them off one by one.
Same thing, that we are working on a book, and that when I saw that, I jumped into happiness because of that.
Okay, moving right along to some Apple news. In the Apple side of things, iPhone 12 is getting a MagSafe compatible battery pack from Anker. So Anker, the electronics manufacturer, has basically leapfrogged Apple to the market with this MagSafe compatible battery pack. So in essence, you can take this battery pack and just stick it to the back of your iPhone 12, and it will go ahead and, just like any other charging battery pack, charge it. But now it doesn't require a physical connection other than that magnetic connection to it. It seems like some hackers are targeting Apple's M1 Max already with some malware. The way that I read the article was that this is incredibly difficult to pull off, and so and it ends up being just adware for the most part. So it doesn't seem to be that much of a large risk, but just so that people are aware that security researchers are paying attention to these new M1 Max and that they are new, so they are kind of, it's chum in the water, and so the sharks are of course going to start swimming around it. And I really think that Apple will do their due diligence and make sure that they are protecting people security wise. So I'm not particularly worried about these new adware potential hacks, and I'm sure that Apple is already aware and closing up the holes for folks out there.
Yeah, there is one more thing on that Anchor story about the battery. There is a couple of things that battery has, and one of them is that it's also going to work with the old charger. So if you have a phone that is the X and going up, you will be able to get that with a case, even that your device is not. If you have a device that is iPhone 12 or below, that has the charger on the back, the induction charger, you will be able to get a case with the magnets and use these batteries. That's one of the wonderful things that they have, is that it's the first accessory that comes, even that is designed to the iPhone 12, that is going to be backward compatible with any device who have that standard of charging, without plugging. So that is really exciting, because a person who has an iPhone 11 or any of those variations will be able to use this accessory to charge. That's going to be really exciting.
All right. Next up is that Microsoft Garage, which is Microsoft's in the Google world, Project 120, kind of their laboratory for being able to, push out these, moonshot type projects, has come up with something called Journal, which is a new ink first note-taking application. And the idea here is that Journal will allow you to use a tool like your Microsoft Surface or other convergence devices that are basically ink focused, what do you call it, stylus focused, and then you're able to go ahead and utilize it. Now, it uses a little bit of AI to be able to make this happen, and I'm really quite curious how this is all going to work. So I have not had a chance to play with it. I was actually commenting to Augusto that back in my office, I have a Surface sitting there, a Surface Pro, but since I haven't been to my office in more than a year because of the pandemic, that Surface is just sitting there, and I really want to go ahead and get it. Of course, my office is many hundreds of miles away from where I am, so I'm not going to make a trip especially for that. But we'll wait for Augusto to join us. We're not going to wait, but I mean, Augusto is switching locations, and so when he switches locations, he'll rejoin us. Anyway, moving along in the news, there is an e-ink and basically e-ink and Sony have developed a new e-notes device. In essence, this is a new tablet. And so the tablets will come in two different displays. So it's a 10.3 and a 13.3 inch display. These are really nice thin tablets, and I'm really looking forward to seeing those come to the market. Not much more is I'm not going to say much more about it until it's out in the market, but the reality is that it's currently in Japan, and we'll see if it makes its way into the United States. But clearly Sony and others are seeing the success of things like the Remarkable 2 and other tablets, and are looking to see whether or not they can make some inroads in that market as well. There is also a review of the Wacom 1 stylus. We talked about this probably a month or so ago, but the Wacom 1 stylus is a pen. It's a style. Duh, it's a stylus. and so Good e-reader did a really good review on it, and there's a video as well. And it's $70, and it provides you with a really nice stylus. And so I'm looking forward to actually maybe getting one and testing it out. But I think it's good for people to know that there are some really nice styli that are coming onto the market. And it's important for us all to remember that we are now moving into this world where we are seeing more and more convergence between the screen and different types of input. We just don't have the keyboard. We don't just have the mouse. We now have touchpads. Like I have an external touchpad that's connected to my Windows 10 machine that allows me to interact with the computer just like I would with my laptops, just like I would with my Chromebooks, and how I would with my normal MacBooks. So this really gives me that same level of continuity in experience on all of the devices. And I think the stylus is probably that next tool also that I want to see connected to my ecosystem. I want to be able to write on the surface of my screens. I want to be able to write on the displays of my computers as well. And so if I'm capable of doing that with something like the Wacom 1, that really cleans up the problem of going from one device where I'm really happy and writing along, then having to switch devices, and then losing that capability of inputting by hand, giving that fluidity of being able to say, I want to be able to draw on the screen in a tool like Evernote, or for others it might be OneNote or otherwise. You want to be able to have that same continuity of input, and being able to jump from one device to another with the right set of tools is really important. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Wacom 1 works. And for $70, it's trivial in terms of adding to, I think I paid $100 for the Apple Pencil, and that doesn't have nearly the capabilities of something like the Wacom 1 on a desktop machine. So I'm looking forward to it. I guess that's not probably true. Somebody can correct me. Maybe Augusto can correct me on that. But for some reason, I think that the
We
way
do
home.
not entertain insanity in this show. This is not the goal.
All right, so that has brought us to the midpoint of our stories, and so with that, we're going to take a break for a word from our sponsors. When we're back, we're going to cover more stories of the week. We've got a lot more headlines to cover, and we're going to do our new tools of the week this week, and then we are going to do our story of the week this week, which we're going to be talking about Microsoft and their big announcement regarding Office 2021. So stick with us, and we will see you after the break.
Are you feeling that you need help implementing a personal productivity system, a goal, or a habit like the weekly review? Do you need help making your current system more robust? Do you want a quick checkup of your current systems to ensure they are the best solutions for you? With more than 20 years of experience in technology, personal productivity, and GTD, Productivity Voice can help you review, renew, create, or fine-tune your system and your personal productivity. Visit productivityvoice.com/anythingbutidle for a free 30-minute consultation. Let's achieve more, enjoy more, and feel more wins in the game of being productive. Head over to productivityvoice.com/anythingbutidle today. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back, everybody, to Anything But Idle. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith. I'm joined with Augusto Pinaud for our second half of the show, where we will be covering more headlines and our story of the week and our new tools. And so let's get into our second half of the headlines, Augusto.
And hopefully with less craziness. Well, the first story we have is how to create a schedule to a daily schedule to organize your day. And it's an article from Lifehack. And it is interesting because as we talk about Dr. Seuss and all the constraints and everything else, comes the schedule as a question of, is it a constraint or not? Or we see it as a constraint. And a lot of people see it that way. So there is a lot of similarities with what we were discussing at the beginning of the show. And this, the article talks about, picking your priorities, include the morning routines, designate, those, the most important tasks, schedule time for things that normally distracted, include breaks, and I will say time to think. But it's interesting that when you look at this article on the theme that we have this week, you could see the similarities between what we were discussing early that Dr. Seuss did with this article and how important are to block those things. I don't remember where or who said, it's not that you don't have time, it's that you are not making the time. And this happened, with the routines, with the things you want to do, with the things that are important. And yes, a lot of things happen during the day, but the reality is if you are not making the time, none of them will happen at the end.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder for all of us that we have to be able to set up our world in order to be able to be more focused. And something that I've always talked about is the fact that habits are not as useful as routines. And I know I sound like the great outlier in productivity for saying that, but when we focus on habits, we don't create as many habits. We just create more frustration and stress. When in reality, the lattice work of our lives are founded on routines. They are the things that we do regularly all the time, and we're capable of hooking onto those routines much more easily and with greater efficacy than we do by trying to force ourselves to develop habits. Habits are automatic because we are already doing them, and routines are things we are already doing. So why not tie those things that are to our routines that we want to do, and that creates greater chance that we're going to do them, and stop worrying about building habits. If those things are important and good enough for you, then you will start doing them, and maybe they'll become automatic. But we're not worried about the automaticity, the building of a habit. We're worried, we're concerned with developing the routines that are going to be most effective. And when we follow those routines, which can be a checklist or a calendar or what have you structured in your day, you're capable of having greater success. And so structuring your day, I think, is far more important and effective than habit development. And I know, I sound like the great, devil's advocate here when it comes to habits all the time. And it's not that I'm against habits. I've seen the literature, and it's clear that habits are difficult and routines already exist. So why don't you just do the things that are already happening and working well for you and attaching things to them? So, all right, moving right along to more time blocking. You are muted, sir.
I did it pretty well for a long part of the show with all the constraints of the day. I think I'm doing pretty well. In the week of the Time Management and Time Blocking Summit, and we will talk more about that on the announcements, it is interesting. Time blocking not working. Try these 8 productivity or 8 things instead. They talk about the Pomodoro technique, and we have talked about the Pomodoro technique in the past. Focus on your top 20%, and that's the Pareto principle. 20% of your efforts will produce 80% of your result. But there was one that was interesting, that was have a relaxing routine. And we talked last week or the show before, we talked about that self-punishment that people do. At the end of the day, when you're really tired, you're supposed to go to bed. It's like, no, I want now time for me. And instead of that, you overstay the night. And instead, if you have, in the same way you should plan that morning routine, you should have that shutdown routine. What you're going to do to disconnect and relax, batch smaller tasks together. And, for our listeners who are familiar with the Getting Things Done, that's what a context is, batch them small things together. So the more you can work on the same context, the more efficient you're going to be. Maximize your downtime. And I have said for many years that we all need a plan B. Hey, we go to a meeting, okay, and the meeting is going to start 15 minutes later. What's your plan B? And when you fail to think on that plan B, what happened is you waste those 5 minutes or those hours or whatever it is, because you don't have what's going to happen when this thing goes late. And the next thing is start single tasking. And single tasking, it is something so important. You need to understand what you can do. Most of us has multiple devices. We have Apple phones and tablets and computers and everything else. Figure it out which task should work on which device. Not every device is the perfect device for tasks. That's one. But 2, now try to do one task in that device instead of try to do them all at the same time. Your brain cannot do multitasking, can do rapid switching. That is different. And the other one is remember the 5-minute rule. If you don't want to do the task, fine. Tell yourself you just need to do it for 5 minutes. And if for 5 minutes you're not engaged with this, you can walk away. And most of the times you will discover that those 5 minutes were all that you needed to break that initial resistance. The last advice they give is enjoy theme days. I don't do theme days. I have never understood it. But there is people, the article quote our friend Mike Vardy. I know he's big on theme days, and he do admin one day and write on another day. Great. If that works for you better, be my guest. Dan Sullivan talks about focus, buffer, and free days. Buffer help you to prepare for your focus days, so that way your days are maximized on production, and then free days you don't touch work. So it's not about how you split the theme. There's people for which that work incredibly well.
Yeah, I think the idea of theming days is a powerful technique for those who are context specific in their roles. Like their roles contain lots of individual actions that, when grouped together, makes it clear for them what they should be working on, and it's not hyper time sensitive. So if you have to do all of your accounting on one day, and if you have to do all of your compliance stuff on one day, if you can group those things, even if it's into 3 or 4 hour blocks, that's really useful. And I actually use some of that in my own world. I actually like the idea of theming days for content, so that and so this ends up being, like a week, and determining this particular week has this content associated with it, this week has this content associated with it, and that way you're capable of saying, okay, on Tuesday I'm going to be writing or recording or what have you around this specific topic, because you have themed that particular week. So everything kind of falls in line with something like that. So you can theme in so many different ways and really help to focus your energy and your work in that sense. Okay, next up we have an article regarding what do we have next? I think it was the minimalists. We're going to skip a couple items to the minimalist one, Augusto. So the Minimalist Podcast is a podcast by Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus, and we can put these other two, the prior two items, Augusto, into the announcements. And so I don't know what you thought about this, but I thought this was really quite interesting. Now, some of you may not know this, but I am not the biggest fan of minimalism. So we're not going to get into that right now. But the Minimalist Podcast, though, is again, these two gentlemen have been doing quite a lot of work in this space and have been talking on it for quite a long time. And of course, Cal Newport has written a whole book called Digital Minimalism, and so I just I disagree with the very premise of minimalism. So let's take a step back, though, to this particular podcast episode, episode number 276. It's called The Unfollowing. And in essence, they talk about how to unsubscribe and unfollow people, how to deal with the notion of creating more tranquility and well-being by virtue of unfollowing. Did you get any thoughts out of this, Augusto? I know I did.
Well, so let me tell a little bit of story. I'm not a minimalistic in any way, shape, or form. Okay, there's 4 screens surrounding me right now that disqualify me immediately. But there is a thing that is interesting from them. They talk or used to talk or continue talking about, if you are interested in this, do a party, bring your friends to help you to do this. And the Unfollowing was really interesting because not necessarily wanted to go into minimalism. I have a task on my system that is go and purge my RSS feed, go and purge, my where I have my articles keep, because we don't notice this, but we start following. Hey, we got to start talking about something, and now we follow that page, and start filling it with noise. And for me, that Unfollowing, yeah, it is good. I don't know if it helped you. The article talk about tranquility and help chaotic life. I don't know about that, but I know that the more I follow, the more meaningful I want. And if I have time to take the weeds out of that, like I do in the backyard of my house, the good. And I think this is good. Go instead of with the question of, is what can I unfollow? Instead of what I'm following and what can you unfollow out of this list? What you are reading that you don't have the pleasure anymore, and there are many podcasts and many feeds that over the years, they were awesome when I started reading them, and well, sorry, we grow apart. It's not them, it's me. Okay, but at the end of the day, I want to unfollow them.
Yeah, I think there was something very interesting, because I had an experience recently where I switched phones, and where all of my I subscribe, I think, to probably 200 plus podcasts, and I don't listen to all of them, but I subscribe to them because I want to know. I kind of scroll through the list of new podcast episodes when they come out, and I'll selectively choose those for when I'm going for a long run, or if I want to go do some work around the house, I'll listen to them while I'm doing those. And I realized that when I transferred phones, that all of the auto downloads ceased to exist. And so, to my horror, I had to go back through and look at all 200 podcasts and decide which ones were going to auto download, which ones I was going to listen to. And I realized that my routine allowed me to see, oh, you know what? When I go walk the dog in the morning, I listen to these 2 podcasts because they're short, succinct, and I do that. When I'm having my breakfast in the morning after I work out, I listen to this podcast in the morning. And it really gave me a clear sense of the podcasts I wanted to listen to and the ones that I could not follow again because they were all unfollowed unceremoniously. And you know what? They're not serving me as much anymore. And there were several that I listened to because I feel like I have to. And that seems like a weird thing to say, but it was one of those things I listened out of obligation. They are either colleagues or friends in many different fields, and so I would listen to them just so that I kept up to date. And I just decided, you know what? I can listen to them whenever I see them in the feed. I can, I scroll through about once a week and I look at the various ones. I load them up, and then during my weekly review, a la GTD, I will then delete them as a part of the process. It's one of the things on my checklist, in my weekly review checklist. And I'll just delete them if I haven't listened to them already, and no harm, no foul. And it gives them a download, I guess. So it's good for them. But the idea, though, is that unfollowing is not a slight. I'm not upset with them. They don't have to be upset with me. It's just a fact of life. And I think that goes across the board. I mean, so often we get so wrapped up in numbers and having so many so many friends and having so many followers. It seems to be a popularity contest more than it is having a vibrant, efficacious life. And I want to feel fulfilled in the connections that I have. And so I don't particularly care how many people follow me. I don't care how many people are connected to me. And it also keeps me humble. I mean, I actually, Augusto and I were having this conversation offline, and I was talking about the fact that I tend to try to keep a humble view of myself. And I think the whole concept of both being unfollowed by people who just don't find what I have to say useful to them anymore, and also the process of unfollowing others is not a slight against. I mean, maybe someone unfollowing me was upset by something I said or whatever, but there's nothing I can do without them letting me know that. And so I would say, if you are, you should reach out to me and let me know, because that is good. But the reality is that I don't have any ill will toward people who unfollow or unsubscribe from my newsletter or any of those kinds of things, because it's just a fact of cleaning up. It's a fact of cleaning up your life in general. Marie Kondo comes from, who created the KonMari method. She comes from the Shinto world, and they just believe, their religious beliefs are around this idea of, deconstruction and reconstruction. That whole concept of renewal. I always think of the Shinto beliefs being somewhat like the phoenix, right? You burn everything down to ashes, and then it reconstructs into this beautiful creature. And so it does hearken to some of that, and I really enjoyed this episode. Again, notwithstanding the fact that you will never hear me say that I am a minimalist, I still found it to be quite an interesting episode, and I found it to be a useful practice to think about what can you get rid of in your life, what can you shed in your life that's no longer serving you. And so with a little bit of minimalism, let's move on over to, unfortunately, Zoom fatigue, and maybe minimizing our Zoom fatigue.
Well, the next article, as you said, is how do you overcome that Zoom fatigue? And obviously, it doesn't apply to Zoom. Apply to Teams. Apply to Google Meet. And I have shared a couple of times here and some other places that it is interesting because a year and a half ago, 2019, before that thing called pandemic, okay, you said, let's do a video conference, and let's use Zoom, and a lot of people were, no, call me on the phone, it's really quick. And now we are having exactly the opposite problem. Okay, for anything, even if it's something really quick, people say, oh yeah, let's make a Zoom call. And we're like, no, that will now take a lot more time than what a quick phone call or even a couple of texts will do. That is a problem, because now we are jumping into this video conference all the time for everything that it's appropriate and for everything that could be solved in other ways. And for a lot of people, it's really hard to read the nonverbal signals. Being on the video conference and seeing the person from the neck up doesn't help to try to read the person, as will help if you are sitting on the same conference room. So that is hard, and it tires, the eyes of the people, or some people gets tired looking at the bright of the screen. We don't think on this, but yeah, get the bright of your screen lower, think the not moving it's hard on a lot of people, sitting here 6, 7 hours without moving because you are on a Zoom and the next Zoom and the next Zoom and the next Zoom. It's really taking a toll in a lot of people. Jeff Siegel, who has been here in the show, teach me a great thing, put an alarm every 30 minutes. I do anyways. I report every 30 minutes what I was planning to do, what is actually happening. And when I do that, I try to stretch, my neck, try to stretch my back. And that has helped me significantly with this fatigue. That I get the lower of the screen. I put some of the screens, I remove the colors. So that way they're black and white screen. On the iPad, it's really easy to do. You get the color filters, done. On a Chromebook, not so much. But in the iPad, it's really easy to do. There are extensions that you can use on Chromebooks as well as the Mac. The Mac also has the color filters, but as Chromebook, an iPad, and on the Chromebooks, there is extension that you can use to make Zoom black and white. So you can get all your calls in Zoom in black and white. That way, the impact or the negative impact that will have on your eyes is significantly less. I don't know what is the solution if you are not using Chrome as a browser on a Windows machine, but if you're using a Windows, I don't know. But again, on a Chromebook, if you can get it into black and white, and that helps significantly with your eyes. If you're not looking data that requires color, it's completely worth it.
Yeah, and there's so many other pieces. People who have gotten ring lights. Like I have a ring light that's on me, and if you're in lots of meetings and you're using a ring light, that's more light that is shining directly in your eyes. Also, moving away from having windows right behind your computer, because that high amount of light all the time is not great for you. So just like things of that nature. I mean, I've taken to actually closing all of the blinds in the first part of the day, just so that I can have a little bit of controlled lighting, so it's not as much light shining in on me, because it's not Zoom fatiguing me. It's the fact that I'm staring, at a screen with a whole bunch of other light that is basically bombarding your sensory systems. And I think that it's really good. The suggestions they made, which is dealing with eye contact and just basically moving yourself out of sight, for example. I for many months into the pandemic, I was keeping myself the same size as who I was talking to on screen, and then I just decided to change it to speaker view and pin the person with whom I was talking, so that I showed up as either small or non-existent depending upon the video technology, and that really increased my ability to engage with the person and not worry about what I look like. And that's just a really great piece there. And again, it's just a matter of figuring out what you need to do in order to be able to feel comfortable and overcome those pieces. I'm not in the category of like, oh, everybody should turn off their cameras. I don't mind if people are not on camera, and I'm fine with that. That's okay if you can't be on screen or you don't want to be. I know that some clients meet with me and they have their kids with them, and so they don't want the kids, like running around and being distracting, so they keep their camera off. That's fine. I don't think it's a problem if you want to be able to do that. It's just a matter of making sure that you do what you need to stay together when you are in meetings. Being prepared for meetings also, I think, is one of those things that really causes a lot of stress for people. If you're prepared for meetings, then the meetings are less stressful. And if you're not prepared for meetings, the meetings are more stressful. And especially when you're on camera and you are, in essence, feeling like you're being recorded. Most of the time when people are on camera, they think of being recorded. And so it has that additional unconscious stress that you think about when you are on camera. So just keep those things in mind. Moving right along, we're going to give a hat tip, a nod to Art Gelwick's and the Idea Pump. He wrote an article about something he called the S2r Method. And Augusto, what did you think about the S2r Method? And I'll start off with the fact that S2r is basically a nap, but Art basically recoined it as the S2r nap, S2r for stage 2 rest, in a way to recoin the concept of the power nap, in that many corporate environments, many businesses think about napping and there's a negative connotation to it. But if we had a term for it that was a little bit more, corporate-y, a little bit more, scientific-y sounding, that it would be more acceptable. And it's kind of interesting, right? That naming has a way of making something seem more official, more business-like. And so he gave two examples: stage 2 rest cycling or short duration mental refresh. But I like this concept of S2r. I think we all need to remember that the concept of napping is, and has been shown from study after study, how powerful it can be. Short naps, not long naps, hours of naps over an hour, certainly have been recently shown to be very detrimental to our health. But the idea of short naps, 20 minutes thereabouts. Most people talk about the idea of doing a caffeine nap. You have your cup of coffee and then you lay down to be able to, or however you nap, whatever position you're in, you put yourself in a position to nap, and then you go ahead and take that nap. And because the caffeine takes roughly about 20 minutes to kick into your system, that's just about the right amount of time before your body then reawakens and is rearing to run, rearing to go, because you have gotten that caffeine buzz to run in there. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of that, only because caffeine has a tendency to spike and then you have a crash, and I don't want that crash. So it just depends on how you want to make it all work for you. But I like the concept.
I will take the crash if the caffeine will spike me. So
I just think you're tolerating the caffeine from too much of it. I think that's how it works.
I don't know nothing about that. I'm not going to recognize that, not even if you bring the lawyer. But I don't know. Napping's. If you have that ability, I don't think everybody have that ability of the 20 minutes nap. If you have that ability, yes, no question about it, do it, because it really make a difference. 20 minutes usually doesn't, I take longer. So what I have done, instead of go for an official nap, is I have found guided meditation that takes around that time, between 15 and 20 minutes, no more than that. So I don't do the nap, but the meditation, the disconnecting, helped me significantly to do that. And in a certain way, I do the shot of coffee and then go for the meditation. So it works really, really well for me.
Great. Wonderful. All right. Well, we have just powered through our headlines this week. And so with that takes us to our new tools of the week. So Augusto and I, scour the interwebs every week in pursuit of all of the various headlines that we bring to you. We cull that down into our short list of topics to discuss. But in and amongst that, we come across many personal productivity tools and services. And so we take this time in New Tools of the Week to share with you some tools that we think are useful to you. And so this actually comes in line with a recent announcement. So LastPass has recently announced that as of March, I believe 15th, their plan is to, in essence, charge people for use of any non-mobile devices for their free plan. And so that means that if you have all mobile devices, you will be able to still use LastPass as the free option, but the moment you want to connect it to a desktop device, you will now have to upgrade to at least the LastPass Premium or LastPass Family. Now, from my perspective, LastPass is extremely affordable. It is also really important for you to have a password manager, so it is both reasonable, affordable, and logical for you to continue with LastPass if you were on it. However, there are those of us in the world who are wanting to have a free free password manager and want to stay with free. They don't want to pay for another service or another subscription. And so there has been a movement toward leaving LastPass. And so they have, in this Verge article, provided some instructions on how to export your LastPass passwords to CSV or XML file, therefore allowing you to go ahead and move that to another service. There are other services out there, and so Augusto and I are going to share with you some of our other services that we recommend. And so starting off with my choice this week is the one that I've been, the free version that I have been recommending to a lot of my clients that want to leave LastPass that gives you an option of a free version that will also give you desktop and mobile password management, and as well as a Chrome extension, a browser extension, and that is Bitwarden. It turns out that Bitwarden is also a free open source product, and so there's that. There are also other versions of Bitwarden, so that if you do want to level up to a higher level plan or even a business plan, you can go ahead and do that. So there are personal plans and business plans. For the premium account, beyond the free version, so the free version gives you access to your vault. You can synchronize your passwords across all of your devices, and you get a secure password generator, and you're self-hosting. So it's synchronizing those passwords around your items, but it doesn't have a web version, a web portal for that. Well, you upgrade to the premium and you get that web portal. You get a one-time password generator. You get up to 100 gigabytes of encrypted file storage. You can also use a second factor key, like a YubiKey. I have Google Titan keys, for example, U2F and Duo type things, and you also get a health report that will alert you when there are problems with your account, like you have used duplicate passwords across the system, as well as emergency access, so you can give someone else access to your account in an emergency situation. And then, of course, you can upgrade to a family version, which gives you 6 members. Now, the LastPass account, I think for $4 a month, also gives you the same thing on the family level. So you're talking a minimal savings per month, but still it is a savings per month on the Bitwarden plan for $3.33 per month if you pay annually. Then there are business plans. So I think Bitwarden is a great tool. I'm going to stick with LastPass and continue using LastPass in the premium side and in the business side for my business passwords. But if you're going for a free plan and you want to stick with a free version, Bitwarden I think is a really great tool. Augusto, what is your pick of the week?
Well, I did not went for free, and I will tell you why. I had people that I close that has been compromised passwords that has got into significant amount of problems, and that they will now, after they went into that expensive problem, happily pay whatever any company charged them to protect their password. I have been using a password manager since the days of the Palm Pilot. Okay, there was a software called Splash ID. I don't know if they exist anymore or not, but I moved at some point to 1Password, and I've been handling with 1Password since the days of the day. So 1Password, on the personal side is $3 a month if you bill it annually. It's $5 a month if you make it to a family. And I tell this story when clients ask me, well, why I want to pay $5 a month. I tell the story of my grandma. My grandma had a cookie jar in her kitchen where she hides, securely money, and grandkids were able to securely access that money, and she knew that the grandkids access her money. Let's be clear, but it was secure, according to her. But the reality is anybody had access. Yeah, we asked her, she was generous and give us the money of the jar, but that is exactly what happened when everybody knows there is money in the jar, Everybody can open the jar and take a bill. And you don't know who is taking that bill. With the amount of time and life and digital world in which we live, I believe that having a good place, a good company who is searching, who can alert you when there are breaches, who can alert you when you are repeating passwords, who can alert you when your password it's been breached, it is really, really important. So as I understand that, I tell my clients, stop drinking 1 Starbucks a month and pay for the password manager. That will give you tranquility to non-stop for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I'll also note that 1Password in a recent security audit by some security researchers identified 1Password as the only password manager out there that had 0 trackers associated with it. LastPass is owned by LogMeIn, if you didn't know, and they found them with the most, as having 7 data trackers associated with them, and things like Google Analytics and some other tracking tools. Nothing that was accessing your passwords or otherwise, but the security researchers saw that as a point of contention, that these tools should not be tracking any data for privacy purposes and potential security risk if it can identify you. I'm not as draconian as it comes to that, in my opinion. I think that these trackers are themselves not necessarily capable of it. While they found Google Analytics associated with that, Google Analytics has the ability to anonymize. So was it anonymized tracking or was it non-anonymized tracking? So I don't know, and that's a question in my mind. But either way, LastPass had the most. Dashlane is another one of those competitors. I think it had 4, something like that. So other trackers are found in these tools, and that helps them understand who's using the tool, how they're using it, that kind of thing. But 1Password was the only one in that list that had 0. Even Bitwarden had 2, I think it was. So it's a pretty solid tool, and you're paying for privacy. You're really truly paying for that level of security and privacy when it comes to your account. But there are some really good password managers out there. Like I said, there's Dashlane, there's Keeper. And remarkably, Augusto, Splash ID is still around, and they have Splash ID Pro has applications for your entire ecosystem, including Edge, an extension for Edge, and so on and so forth. So, good looking in terms of Splash ID.
I moved one from a Splash ID to 1Password, and that was such a painful process. Not because of a Splash ID, because you need to reorganize that. I swear, unless they go out of business, I will not move again.
And it's so interesting, how difficult it is to think about moving passwords today. Thankfully, like with LastPass and these other tools now, you export a file, you import a file, and it's pretty simple how the whole process works. And so even to the effect that if you want to export all of your passwords and create more security, export all of your passwords out of your browser and into your password manager, and then delete them from your browser. And so your password manager now has control in an encrypted blob, what we call a blob, right? Because you can't read what's inside the blob. And this gives you a greater level of security, not because your browsers are inherently insecure, but because your browsers are basically your new operating system. You have so many things that you are doing in your browser that it becomes a really, like Augusto said, if you know that there's money in the cookie jar, you're going to go after the cookie jar. And so many people see browsers as the new cookie jar, and so you don't want to put passwords in your browser. So get them out of there, put them in your password manager, and you'll be more secure.
And in your Mac, as well as Chromebooks, as well as your iPads and iOS devices, you can define that the iOS should use that password manager as default instead of the other options in the browser and everything else.
Yeah, on Android and iOS, that's a real cinch. I have it set to LastPass on all of them, and it's brilliant. It pops up a little button.
I have it all set up to 1Password, and it works incredibly well.
All right, so those are our new tools of the week, and that brings us on to our story of the week. What is our story of the week this week, Augusto? Some Microsoft
Microsoft announced that Office 2021 will be available for Windows and Mac OS next year. And they talk about Windows and Mac OS. Interestingly enough, they are coming back to the old model. So we went all 365. Now we're coming back to the let's install and buy the license. Even they're talking about having a license where you can buy and don't pay the fees anymore until you use it. So
and this also includes the LTSC, which is the long-term service contract version of Office. So for enterprise, or if you're a small business and you just know that you can't update your machines all that often for cost or whatever purposes, you can install that Office version, the LTSC version, and then call it a day for the next, say 5 years. And so I think it's quite brilliant on Microsoft's part. It's throwing a little loop for folks who are used to 365, and I bet you that Microsoft believes that they made as much money as they can currently off of the market for subscription service based Microsoft 365 users, and so they've already got enough people in that market. They're already the leader in that space, and they now want to throw a little I don't know what life preserving raft to those businesses who are really coming up against the end of their prior LTSC versions of Office, and they're just giving them the ability to do that. Plus, there's probably a small community of enterprise that's going to buy a lot of volume for the Office 2021 and the Office LTSC, and that's going to be a good book of business for them. So,
yeah, so that's interesting. There is no word yet on what is going to happen on the mobile side, on Android or iOS, but it's still interesting that.
I bet you they're not going to give them access to that. It's just going to be a matter of the desktop-only versions, so that people who have their devices, they have to have them either locked down for security purposes, and they have to have official versions of the Office platform. That's what this is for. And I think that in the productivity space, if you're running in a secure environment on desktop, Office is the dominant tool. It's really the only tool outside of, say, LibreOffice, if your organization even allows for free open source software to be running on the system. And I can't imagine a lot of enterprise that would be the case. So it's going to be Office, and this gives those kinds of lockdown secure environments the ability to do that. And there are businesses like mine. I've chosen to use Google Workspace and put everything into the cloud in that secure environment, and others have chosen that the opposite side is what they want, which is to put everything into local machines and synchronize those documents to, say, some centralized server. So that's what they've done, and I think it's an interesting move. I'm curious to see how the difference between 2021 Windows and 2021 Mac will look and feel. They have been working slowly but surely to bring those into parity, but say Outlook on Mac still is lagging behind Outlook on Windows, and so there's just certain features that aren't available. And I really hope that in 2021, this Office 2021, that Microsoft brings those at least in closer parity, so that Mac and Windows have the same features when you're using the same Office products.
I think there is a long list of people wishing the same.
I know. All right, so that was our story of the week, and that brings us to our announcements. We have quite a few announcements this week. Go figure. First up is actually a video from Francis Wade about the upcoming task management and time blocking summit that's coming up on this Thursday. And actually, Augusto and myself are both leading sessions as well as moderating some panel discussions this weekend, Thursday through Saturday. And so Francis is actually going to be starting a new segment on the show about task management apps. And so we thought he would pop in and tell us a little bit about the Task Management and Time Blocking Summit 2021, as well as the task management app discussions he'll be doing going forward.
Hi, this is Francis Wade over here at the Task Management and Time Blocking Virtual Summit 2021 starting this week. One of the questions that we're going to be asking and answering is, what are the roles of autoschedulers and what are they? Well, an autoscheduler, if you've ever tried time blocking, takes away all the pain of redoing your schedule when things change and you need to all of a sudden rejigger your entire calendar just because there was a disruption today. Now, if you ever tried time blocking, you know that that's the worst part. Time blocking starts off fairly easy, and as you add more tasks, it becomes devilishly difficult just to keep up with all the overhead. Well, the autoschedulers are meant to sort of an automatic hand that reaches into your calendar, moves all the tasks around, keeps the appointments in place, and then presents you with an optimized suggestion of kind of the ideal schedule for you to follow for the next few days. So coming soon to you, there'll be an autoscheduler. It'll make its way probably to your laptop or your smartphone. But for sure, in the next few years, autoschedulers are going to be embedded in all kinds of devices, calendars, all kinds of places in our world. And they should make our lives a lot easier. At the moment, there are about 8 to 10 of them that are up to date and are actively being used. And we're going to feature them at the summit coming up. And that's it. Signing out from the summit. This is Francis Wade. Take care and all the best.
All right. Thank you to Francis Wade. As I said, he's going to be bringing us a new segment, and that will be all about updates relating to task managers on the market. And of course, he'll be keeping us up to date on all the auto schedulers that are being built into time management and task management software today. And actually, tomorrow, while we're in announcements, tomorrow I will be hosting a special session tomorrow inside of Personal Productivity Club. So if you are not in Personal Productivity Club, join us over there at www.personalproductivity.club, and Francis and I will be in conversation about the future of automated time blocking technologies. And so we're going to just do a quick conversation tomorrow evening about that, and so feel free to join us. What are our other announcements this week, Augusto?
Well, there is a new podcast in Spotify where is featuring Bruce Springsteen and President Obama. If you have not a chance to watch it, it's really, really fun. I at least enjoy it. The other two is Cosmo Time. This week announced the integration with Asana. So if you Cosmo Time, it's a great application talking about time blocking and copying about all that. It is a really important thing. So if you use Asana, this is a great time to play with Cosmo Time and see where Asana can help you.
Fantastic. Also, applications have opened for Apple's Entrepreneur Camp for female developers. This is an upcoming entrepreneur camp, and it's there to provide support and resources for female developers and founders. And so, of course, in furtherance of Apple's desire to increase diversity and inclusion in their developer community, they are hosting these events aimed at a wide variety of demographics that are considered underrepresented in the industry. And so Apple announced the inaugural Entrepreneur Camp. This was for Black developers and founders, of course, in Black History Month. And now they are doing this for female developers. And so this is a continuation of that process. There's an application form, and it's all on the link in the show notes, so you can get access to that. And I think it's a great opportunity. If you are or know a female developer or female founder, please send this along to them and have them join if they're interested in developing in the Apple ecosystem. I think that it's just so important that we have more, young women in STEM, and that we support our female developers and founders. And so I'm just really excited to see that Apple is doing this. And I know that Google has some work to do in that space as well. So I'm just looking forward to seeing all of the big tech support and bring these underrepresented communities to light. With that, we have another item, which is that Jason Fried, notable for his work at Basecamp, or 37 Signals, turned Basecamp, and now Hey.com, the email service with Daniel Hanmeyer Hansen. Is that correct? Yeah, DHH, I think. And so I now have to look up I want to make sure I get his name right. But David, I'm sorry. So it's David Hanmeyer Hansen. Sorry, I don't know why I thought his name was Daniel. But either way, they have now co-written a book called A World Without Email. And this is interesting, to say the least. But more importantly is that Politics and Prose, which is a bookstore I have been noted to wander around many years of my life. I've whiled away hours and hours in that bookstore in Washington, D.C. They're hosting a live virtual conversation with Cal Newport and Jason Fried, the co-authors of A World Without Email. That'll be at 6 p.m. At 6 p.m. Eastern, U.S., on March 4th. Tickets are free, but you have to register in advance to attend. And Cal is basically offering a little thing. Basically, he said, if you pre-order the book and you send along your receipt, you will then be able to get an excerpt basically from the book, a long excerpt he will send along to you, and access to his Email Academy video series. So if you're interested in getting access to that stuff, pre-order the book, follow the registration form that he's provided in the link in the show notes, and voila, you get access to this Email Academy, and you get kind of a long excerpt from the book ahead of schedule, which is kind of nice. So those pieces are there. I'm looking forward to reading and probably eviscerating the argument of A World Without Email, but with great respect to both of them.
Hey, I'm still waiting for that paperless world that they offered to me in 1980 something.
Oh, I'm still looking forward to the minimalist world that everybody keeps talking about, and so we'll see what happens when that happens. But either way, that brings us to the end of our show, and so thank you, Augusto, for helping us get ready and prepared every week for Anything But Idle.
It is fun, and it's my pleasure.
All right. Please let us know if there's a story we missed by using our contact form on Anything But Idle. Feel free to tweet or DM us at Anything But Idle on Twitter. If you have a question or comment, again, head on over to anythingbutidle.com. On the episode page, you can leave a comment or a question. While you're on Anything But Idle, you'll find our show notes with links to all the stories, our tools of the week, any extra stories that we didn't cover today that we couldn't cover because of time, the text transcripts that are readable on the page and as well as available to download as PDF. And then you can learn how to subscribe on the page, follow us for free. You just basically click on subscribe, but it will give you instructions on how to follow us in your favorite podcast app. And otherwise, click the thumbs up if you're watching us live. Feel free to leave a rating or review if you are listening to the podcast. And thank you all for joining us for this Anything But Idle. With that, we'll see you next time. Here's to your productive life.